You may have asked yourself before, where did we come from? Or you might have asked a deeper question, how did we come to be? Well, today I'm going to set out to answer this question by giving you a brief history of our universe. If we were to hop in a time machine and go back in time 13.8 billion years ago, we would be able to witness the birth of the universe, also known as the Big Bang. This was when all the matter and energy in the universe was in a space smaller than an atom, and then all of a sudden it began to rapidly expand. These are all of the things that happened within the first second of the Big Bang. These things set the stone for the rest of the universe to build off of. 10 to the negative 43rd seconds after the Big Bang was known as the Planck era. This was when the universe was theoretically as small as it could possibly be and as hot as it could possibly be. Here we saw the end of grand unification, which is when all the fundamental forces began to break down and become independent of one another. The final split of these forces was known as the end of the electroweak era. Now we have inflation. The universe inflated so quickly that it went from half the size of a DNA molecule to 10.4 light years in radius in less than a tenth of a billionth of a second. After this, matter and antimatter began to cancel each other out in the quark epoch, and the final remaining bits of mass came together to form protons and neutrons in the hadron epoch. This whole thing happened in less than a second. But what were these four fundamental forces? The strongest of the four was the strong nuclear force. This is responsible for holding atoms together. It is followed by the weak nuclear force, which is responsible for radioactivity, like beta decay. Electromagnetism is just light, and then we have gravity. But gravity is actually a huge mystery, because no one really knows where it came from or why it exists in the first place. For a long time in the universe, it was so hot that electrons weren't able to bind to atoms, leaving the whole place as one humongous sea of plasma. As the universe cooled, there was a certain point where it was cool enough for the electrons to recombine with atoms and release their energy as light. A photo of the cosmic microwave background shows this instant when light was first released into the universe. Now that all of these atoms were formed, all of the energy was stuck in them, and there was no source of light in the universe. This was known as the Dark Ages because there were no stars. Hydrogen clouds began to clump together into nebula, until they were so big that stars were made in nuclear fusion reactions. This whole process was called reionization, or when the first stars were born. While all these massive stars were being produced, gravity was also pulling them in to create galaxies. It was during this time that a very young Milky Way galaxy began to form, looking nothing like it does today. In fact, the only reason why it does look like a spiral is because of dark matter and dark energy. It wasn't until about 9 billion years ago when we first saw the effects of dark matter, and 3 billion years after that was the first signs of dark energy. Unknown and mysterious forces, they are currently expanding and accelerating our universe as we speak. As stars began to die out, bigger and newer elements were thrown into the universe. These new elements came together to form chemicals which made compounds, minerals, and rocks floating around in space. All of this space rock and water got trapped in orbit around stars, like our sun, and formed protoplanetary disks of hot rock, water, and dust. This hot rock would slam hard into each other, making bigger and bigger rocks until we began to see a proto-Earth, or super hot ball of rock that would later become Earth. During this time, Earth got slammed into by another protoplanet, Theia, launching a lot of hot rock into orbit around us. This debris later became the moon. Even though Earth was taken pretty much its final form, it was still getting slammed by comets full of water. This water began to cool down the Earth's surface, and over time, water was able to form vast oceans. The cooling of the exterior of the Earth also gave way to tectonic plate movement, which is the fundamental driving force of why our continents look the way they do. We also saw the first theoretical supercontinent, Most of the chemical processes that happen in life happen in solution, or in water. And since the Earth is a majority of water, with all these chemical reactions floating around, it was only a matter of time until we would begin to see this first life thing start to emerge. At first, it was just bacteria that began to grow exponentially and multiply. But over the course of tens of millions of years, life began to adapt to the harsh conditions of Earth and make their own energy using photosynthesis. This process began to take the CO2 out of the thick, toxic atmosphere and convert it into oxygen. The atmosphere around the Earth started to become rich in oxygen, which in turn formed an ozone layer, which made it easier for life to exist on land. We then began to see multicellular life begin to form in the oceans. These organisms made life way more complex. This life then started to move onto land because of the new ozone layer and increased oxygen production, which made it possible for them to live there. We saw the Cambrian explosion, which is when Earth would see the most diversity in life in history. All of these sea dwelling creatures looked like they were straight out of a nightmare or at least a science fiction novel. Then, all of a sudden, we see Earth's very first extinction event, where 60% of the life on Earth was completely wiped away due to very violent geological processes like volcanoes, glaciation, and dramatic change in ocean level. Earth would later see 4 more extinction events, with the very last one being when the dinosaurs were wiped out. Scientists also believe that we are currently living in an extinction event that is being driven by human actions. About 300 million years ago, we saw the formation of Pangaea, which was the last supercontinent to exist on this planet. Tectonic movement has now broken up that supercontinent into the 7 smaller continents that we know and love today. Pangaea was also swarmed with dinosaurs and all of these crazy creatures until the iconic meteor came down and wiped them all out. It was after this extinction event that we saw the very first mammals start to evolve alongside the very first birds that we now see. These primates would evolve into something known as the Australopithecus, the thing that would eventually evolve into humans. Life in history may seem ancient to us humans, but as it turns out, we are something so insignificantly new to the universe. If we had a timeline of the entire universe laid out, the entire human history would make up 0.0023% of the entire time in the universe. We have a very narrow slice that we have lived in, and depending on how we treat our planet and the life on it, our thin slice may be getting smaller. As far as we know, we are the only planet in the known universe that has life on it. We are literally one of a kind. If you need any sort of motivation in your life, remember that one fact. We are special. We only have one shot at this life thing. So let's make everything right.